Hello everybody, welcome to your deadline injury stream here with Mr. Ben Dinnery himself. Before we get into it, there's a lot of big news, and as you can see here, we've got the predicted lineup article that you always put out on FF Hub. But yeah, Ben, how are you doing today? Because, we don't talk about your injury news, your well-being.
I'm never good on a Friday, mate, especially around this time. What we had one, two, three, I think double figures almost in terms of press conferences between 1 and 2 o'clock. So jumping from that straight into this, my head is absolutely frazzled, but we'll do our best. Caveat before we kick off, and I know we say this every single time, this is the predicted lineup article for FF Hub, but it hasn't been updated with any of the press conferences from the last hour. We have included Newcastle, Liverpool, Wolves, and Brighton from this morning, but nothing past that point. So keep on tuning in, refreshing, and checking it out. Once I get this done, I'll jump back on. Then I've got a live Q&A with the Athletic. Then I'll jump back on and hopefully it'll all be done. And of course, you can always check out the premierinjuries.com injury table as well with the latest news.
And I'll add a caveat to your caveat as well, Ben, just throwing them out there. But as always, with this injury news, we're as up to date as possible. But player could get injured in a warm-up tomorrow as well. So, don't get too angry at Ben if there is, any sort of news that comes out unexpectedly, out of the woodwork. And we've already got some thanks, Bens, to you. Looking forward to this from Never Give Up FPL and FPL Cups that says, thanks, guys. And yeah, just to give some headlining news, it will be an interesting one because we're going to talk about Mitrovic. Zinchenko's going to be in there, possibly Jamie Vardy as well because of how good Leicester did last weekend. But before we get into that, FPL Cupster is asking about his own injury here. He said, Ben, I got 5 stitches in my knee 12 days ago. How long before I get back to being 100% and pick myself as manager?
Picking yourself as manager, as long as you're not planning on doing any knee slides down the line, if you're fortunate enough for your team to score a goal or win, maybe in the next sort of 3 to 7 days, you should be absolutely fine. Of course, you've got to be very careful with that area. You don't want to be banging it and knocking it and potentially open up that wound again. But yeah, look, good luck with that one. As long as you need to make sure that so you don't break the skin and it doesn't become infected. Otherwise, you should be absolutely fine.
Right, well, let's start off. We're going to go through this alphabetically for everybody. And we're going to start off with AFC Bournemouth. So what's the kind of news there, Ben?
Yeah, this was Gary O'Neill, interim boss. He spoke on Thursday, so this is information that we do have to hand. Good news generally with regards to their squad. Potential return for Joe Rothwell. Hasn't featured at all since signing for the Cherries. And also Ben Pearson. I think he picked up a knee injury in that 9-0 drubbing by Liverpool. Both those players have been training really, really well and could be in contention. I say in contention, what I mean is as a place in that matchday squad, certainly not pushing for a start. Ryan Fredericks, another summer signing, being dogged by injuries, muscle problems, groin, calf. He's another player that has trained as well. So good news with regards to that. Lloyd Kelly, unfortunately, ankle problem. No timeline in terms of when he'll be back or on David Brooks. With regards to this starting lineup, we had one change last week, and that was Kiefer Moore coming in with Christie dropping to the bench. I flip-flopped them back over again this week, and I've went back to that previous starting 11. I think maybe it could be a reversal of that slight formational tweak for the Cherries.
Interesting news there, and they've been in good form as well. They've actually kind of turned things around, especially defensively. They're not as leaky as they once were. But one of the big games at the weekend is the Arsenal-Liverpool one. As an Arsenal fan, as a gunner, I'm going into this game fairly confident, actually, especially with the form of Liverpool. It seems weird to think that I'd probably be disappointed if we don't get the win or, at least a point from this match. And it seems positive news with the injury front. But yeah, Ben, do you want to open out the situations in the Arsenal 11 then?
Yeah, the main talking point is, of course, around the left back, and that's Zinchenko. Reports that he missed training on the eve of that Europa League game on Thursday night. However, I understand that is more of a precautionary measure given his recent calf problems. Mikel Arteta, again, very coy with regards to availability around his squad. And this is one of those instances that you referred to at the top of the show. Arsenal have another session on Saturday. So, with regards to any kind of definitive team news, that just isn't going to happen because, like I say, he hasn't spoken live today. It means that Arsenal still, in effect, have 2 sessions to go. But I have got Zinchenko in there on the left-hand side. They were heavily changed and rotated on Thursday. A fairly easy, or it was a bit of a formality, that 3-0 result. So it got players rested who needed it, and also an opportunity for a few of those fringe players to get minutes into their legs.
And still Ben White at right back, even after Tomiyasu's kind of played well recently. You don't think he's going to sneak in?
I do think he's a better right back, I must admit, and he would be my choice. But I don't see Mikel Arteta switching things up too much. It's hard to go against that winning team mentality. There may be opportunities coming up, maybe further down the line. I just think Tomiyasu has to bide his time. I'm not as confident as you in that Arsenal getting that result. Maybe in a 4-3-3 for Liverpool, but that slight formational tweak midweek gives them a little bit of confidence. I think they look a little bit more solid in that 4-2-3-1. There's a lot of competition in there for places. They're getting a few people back from injury. I think it'll be a tight game. I think there might only be 1 goal in it.
Yeah, I just target the likes of Martinelli, who's going to play on that side with Trent Alexander-Arnold. I love the guy. I think he's brilliant. But down that side, Liverpool have been particularly weak just because they've not been able to kind of cover that, especially with the injuries to right centre-back as well. They've not had consistency. So we'll see. It's going to be a good game, whatever happens. And statistically, I think it's the highest scoring game in Premier League history. So hopefully there's goals as well. Now, one team that a lot of people have turned their attention to is Aston Villa. But is there positive injury news there? I guess with the return or potential return of Matty Cash.
And Villa very much needed this following the hamstring injury picked up by Ludwig Augustinsson last week against Leeds. That's probably going to keep him out for at least 2, possibly even 3 weeks, or towards the end of October. We know that Lucas Digne is struggling with that complicated heel problem that was referred to as Steven Gerrard. And with regards to any kind of return to play timeline, that's off the charts. So we have Matty Cash, who I firmly expect to return to the squad, or certainly return to the starting 11 following a week of training with Ashley Young, switching flanks. The problem for Villa so far this term has been goals. And that's why I've included Danny Ings in that attack. Hasn't had much of a look in, if the truth be told. And I find that a little bit strange. I say that Gerrard's favouring Philip Coutinho. Maybe there's a little bit of an old boys pact going on a little bit there, because I think Coutinho certainly hasn't been pulling up any trees. For me, I would probably put Buendia in there. I think he deserves a bit of an opportunity with that. But of course, Coutinho, when he does bang, he is great. We've seen his arrival from Barcelona and he made a big splash. So, they need goals, and that's why I've went with this fairly attacking side. I've got Douglas Luiz sitting in there. Bobadou Kamara, he is out until after the World Cup.
And I totally agree with you with the Coutinho situation. I think at times they're shoehorning a lot of players in at Aston Villa, probably at the detriment to the tactics of the team. I think Buendia is the better, more creative player at the moment. He came on last weekend. He looked to be much more involved with the attack. He gave an impetus as well, just that kind of oomph that maybe Aston Villa were missing in the attack. But maybe with Cash in there as well, it might bring that creativity, because obviously Gerrard likes those wing-backs to be involved with the attack. We'll see if they can turn it around, but I'm not liking the Gerrard Aston Villa at the moment. I think it's been quite a letdown, especially with the money that has been spent. He's got a lot of the personnel in there. Brentford is one that people will be having an eye on. They're against your boys Newcastle, but the big news will always be on Ivan Toney. I think he's the best but only asset that you really want from that team. Is it all good with the big man up top?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do actually own even Tony as my fantasy asset. And in fact, I even captained him as a differential last weekend instead of Haaland. I managed to captain Tony when he banged his hat-trick. He was very disappointing against Bournemouth, but you wouldn't bank against him scoring on his return to Tyneside. Elsewhere within that squad, I suppose the big talking point was around Pontus Jansson. Confirmation that he pulled up with a hamstring problem. Who will start at centre back and how Thomas Frank will set up remains to be seen. I've went with that 3-5-2, although we have seen a 4-3-3, particularly towards the beginning of the season. Zanka or Matthias Jorgensen gets the nod. Ethan Pinnock, who has been training fully, just as a little bit short in terms of his match fitness and sharpness. Last played competitively back in April. That was a knee problem, and then that carried over to a hamstring issue as well. So, yeah, not a great deal of change in that Brentford lineup. It's going to be a tough game for Newcastle, but as always, I'm confident of getting 3 points.
I'm confident in your boys as well. I mean, one of the big problems with Brentford has been the defence this season. You know, the XG conceded and actual goals conceded per 90s, not great, but they've blown people out of the water with their good attacks. They're kind of making up for it in that sense, but we'll see how long they can keep that up. Now, another team, especially last weekend with the switch over in manager, who surprised everybody, is Brighton. And I think it's one of the rare occasions where a team has lost their manager, but not because of a bad reason. And so the team are still fairly good. You know, they look good, they're playing well. Tactically, they're an exciting team. And they've got some good assets in there as well with Trossard, Gross. So what is the situation there? Is there any chopping and changing that needs to be done this weekend?
Not in my opinion. The only slight question mark is over the fitness of Moses Caicedo. He failed to train on Thursday, but new boss Roberto De Zerba expects him to rejoin the group on Friday, and he thinks he'll be okay. So that said, how can you go to Anfield, take away a good 3-3 draw and then change things too much? I just don't think it'll happen. So it's the same 11 for me. Enoch Wepu, he was hospitalised during the international break while on international duty, still working his way back up to fitness, so we don't expect him to make the matchday squad.
Right, let's move it on to the next team then. And we're going to be talking about the Blues of Chelsea. They looked really good in the Champions League. I like their performance there, especially Reece James. But there was sad news with Wesley Fofana. He got injured. Also, I liked him as a differential centre-back pick, 4.4, one of the best defences in the Premier League. And now he's going to be out. How long for, Ben? And I guess is there other injury news that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, Wesley Fofana had a bit of torrid time in recent seasons with regards to injuries. And when he was forced off midweek, it didn't look great. You know, the potential involvement of maybe certainly ligament damage and some speculating because of mechanism, the way that knee was valgus, maybe some ACL. Thankfully, that doesn't look to be the case. It's a lot better than initially feared. We're talking maybe 4, possibly up to 6 weeks. Still hope that he could feature before the World Cup finals in Qatar. That gives him a chance to maybe go away. With regards to who potentially comes in, we've seen Trevor Chabaloa. He was introduced midweek, but we also seen Koulibaly because he was already starting. So those are the 2 players picked out as potential replacements. Elsewhere, I'm also bringing Marc Cucurella back into that starting 11, and that's nothing against Ben Chilwell. I just think given the fact that he's just returning off a long-term serious knee injury, to start 3 games in 1 week might be a little bit of a push. It could be a little bit risky. Marc Cucurella had that sore throat last week. Again, that resulted in him in a hospital visit. He's cleared. He's now back fully fit and available. So yeah, there's a few question marks over which way Graham Potter could go, but for the moment, I'm sticking with Koulibaly, even though Graham Potter has singled out Chabaloa for his performances in training, while he's been on the fringes of that starting 11.
Andre Bottes has asked thoughts on Chilwell game time. So I guess, maybe we could frame it over the next few game weeks. Do you expect him to make it more into the team? Or are they going to manage him conservatively just to make sure that he gets to that World Cup?
I mean, look, and I'm sure Graham Potter will be very supportive of his players, and he wants them to do well in every competition that he plays in. But first and foremost, his priorities for Chelsea, not for England, not for Qatar, not for the World Cup, and he wants Ben Chilwell performing optimally to the best of his ability, and he wants him fit, and he wants him to remain fit. So any decisions with regards to his involvement in that team will be based on purely from a Chelsea standpoint. Now, it's very difficult at this moment in time because Graham Potter is so early into his tenure at Stamford Bridge, just how he's going to go between Cucurella and Ben Chilwell. Obviously, he managed Marc Cucurella he brought him to the Premier League with Brighton, and he sold him to Thomas Tuchel. But for me, I think it's hard to look past the fact that Chilwell's come in, done a really good job. And I'm always, I'm very much old school. If you're performing well, and the team is winning, then I wouldn't want to change things up too much. It's purely the fact that, it's a third start potentially that would worry me, and that's why I have Cucurella in the 11.
And just the people who maybe are tuning in halfway through, we will get on to Mitrovic. I think he's very soon, in fact, because we're going through the teams alphabetically. Nuclear Atoms has one more question on the Chelsea situation. He's asked, what's going to happen with Brozier now? Aubameyang looks secured. So is there no way into this first 11 for the young striker?
I mean, it's going to be tough, isn't it? There's a lot of competition, particularly in those attacking positions. We've seen Raheem Sterling play up there. If he goes with a 1, you can sit the 3 in behind. You'll be talking about the likes of, you've got a Pulisic, you've got a Hakim Ziyech, you've got Havertz, you've got Mason Mount, you've got Kante to come back into that midfield. So, you're looking at who is Armando Broja going to displace? And I would say it's tough. He may have to rely upon it and maybe an injury or a suspension. And if he gets that opportunity, really go in there and perform well and get goals and make it a really tough decision for Graham Potter. But for the moment, at least, I don't really see him getting too many starts.
Okay, I said last question, but there is one more on Thiago Silva. Do you think he'll get rested from FPL Cupster?
This is another good question, another one that I have tied with. Again, under Thomas Tuchel, he was a player that I would have certainly expected to drop out this weekend. He's 37 years of age, I think, or maybe even he's just turned 38. So again, you're asking a player to start, 3 big, high intensity, high energy games within the space of a week. He was away on international duty as well. Although, yes, granted, he didn't get a lot of minutes. I just don't know what Potter. I mean, this will be one that I could potentially look to change as well. Like I say, we've just come off the Graham Potter press conference, so keep your eyes open. There may be 1 or 2 changes within this starting 11.
All right, let's turn our attention to another side of London. We're going south of the river to Crystal Palace. So what is the injury news there? We've had a lot of questions on Joachim Andersen, but he's not in this predicted 11. Has that changed? You said you haven't updated it. Do you think he could be in the 11?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one that we've just had literally hot off the press, heard from Patrick Vieira within the last sort of 40 or so minutes. He has trained the last few days. He was a late withdrawal, complained of a calf problem during the final session last week. That's why he missed, but he has been working absolutely fine. So he's in pole position to make that start. James Tompkins returned to the matchday squad. He isn't 100% fully match fit anyway, so that would have always been a bit of a stretch and a bit of a risk. But like I say, Joachim is a player that I will be bringing into the starting lineup. Quick update on Nathaniel Klein, stretch it off against Chelsea. That didn't look great. Thankfully, early reports indicate that it's maybe not as severe as first thought, and potentially maybe a return later this month.
Well, that's good news to hear. We never like to see those situations with players being stretched off. Alfred69, he's got quite a lot of interest in Crystal Palace because he said, is Edouard now to start, or is that a gamble?
He certainly wouldn't be in my fantasy team, just purely based on the fact that you never quite know which way Patrick Vieira is going to go. We have seen him flip-flopping between Edouard and Mateta on occasions. And neither player seems to really, want that to earn that shirt and get those goals and again make a decision difficult for Patrick Vieira. They've been very stop-start. Performances have been okay, but ultimately it's goals that that they're going to be judged on, and neither player has been, a huge success. So as confident as I can be that Edouard, I think, just edges it over Mateta. But like I say, I wouldn't be surprised if it did go the other way because there isn't a great deal between the two.
So with the striker situation, I don't know if people are too interested in what I'd say, but with Edouard, like you said, that there's too much risk. I'd rather go for Callum Wilson at the moment. He looks so good. There's a lot of good underlying data. I think he's a bit more expensive, but he's nailed on, and he's nailed on in a top 5 attack. So we're going to move on. Somebody's asked about Doherty. We will get to Tottenham in a bit. We're still going through alphabetically. But if you've got, say we're on Everton at the moment, if you've got Everton specific questions, ask away. And then if we forget anybody, you can ask at the end because Ben will stick around just for a little bit to answer people's questions. But yes, we've mentioned it. We're on the Toffees. It looks like a fairly unchanged 11 apart from Coleman is back in the back line.
Yeah, and that followed the injury to Nathan Patterson. We expect him again to be in the region of maybe 4 to possibly 6 weeks, hopeful of a return before that winter break. So Coleman starts in there. The other main talking point is the return of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. His knee and groin problems have restricted his minutes on the training pitches in recent times, but he's training normally. Of course, he's nowhere near fully match fit, and that's why I still have Neil Maupay leading that Toffees attack.
Will he get a bit of game time though? Because, like you said there, he's been out for a long while. He needs that game time. Is he going to be given 10, 15 minutes? How long do you expect before we start seeing him properly in that 11?
Look, there's lots of factors to consider in and around this. And I think first and foremost, it depends how, one, Neil Maupay is playing, how Everton are playing, and if they're winning. That eases the pressure then on Frank Lampard to maybe rush or throw Dominic Calvert-Lewin back too quickly. We know over the past 14, 15 months, his injury record has been pretty horrendous, one injury after another. But the importance of his availability can't be understated. We've seen that under Carlo Ancelotti. So, Frank Lampard's spoken about the return of Calvert-Lewin, but they don't want him just back for 1, 2, or 3 games. They want him back for the remainder of the season. And therefore, like I say, if things are going fairly well, I maybe expect Calvert-Lewin to be integrated from the bench maybe over the next 2, 3, possibly even 4 games. But a lot of that will come down to Neil Maupay and also, picking up injuries, also suspensions, and seeing what the squad's like around those congested fixture periods when we have those midweek games coming up as well.
Now, is it correct that Craig Gordon missed the last game? That was through illness, wasn't it?
It certainly wasn't Craig Gordon.
No.
Because he would be the goalkeeper.
I always do this with him.
Yeah. He was introduced from the bench. He was part of the matchday squad. That was an illness-related decision. Hadn't trained fully. So Dwight McNeil came into the start 11. He got his goal, but certainly I think, again, Dwight McNeil would consider himself a little unfortunate if he doesn't start again following that goal. But I do have Gordon in that starting 11 for now.
All right. So not Craig Gordon, by the way.
Not Craig Gordon.
So this is the big news. Fulham, game week 10. is Mitrovic going to lead the line? You've got him in there. Like we said to people, he might not be in there. What is the injury situation?
So the situation as it stands, the official update from Marco Silva is that Alexander Mitrovic was out on the training pitches on Friday morning. He has done a little bit of ball work. However, he is still struggling with that foot stroke ankle problem that he picked up playing for Serbia against Norway. So that is still hampering him. It was that same problem that he took a knock on against Newcastle that forced him off during the first half. Now, yeah, very guarded with regards to team selection. Marco Silva turned around and he said, look, I'll not be making any decisions with regards to who's starting and who's not until after the final session on Saturday. Now, ordinarily, what you want to see is you need to be all of those players taking part fully and involved. If anybody was to recover in time, you would expect it to be Mitrovic. He's a warrior. He's a battler. He's not a player that likes to miss games. That's why I have him starting. But by, no stretch of the imagination here is he nailed. There are big question marks, and thankfully it is more of an impact injury. So it'll be pain management, and yes, it's going to be very, very sore. The decision will be, whether he's able to play through that pain, or whether Marco Silva says, takes that decision out of his hands and says, look, we'll keep you back. We've got bigger games down the road. The fixtures, will be coming thick and fast. Let's rest up and let's regroup in game week 11. So, like I say, very close, but it's going to be a tough call.
We've got a few questions on the Fulham situation here. It's popping off in the comments here, so make sure to get them in because we're going to cover it for a minute or two, it seems. So FPL Cupster has asked, is Tete back for sure?
Nope, absolutely not. He's a player, again, that he was, so one of the few players that Marco Silva did actually single out. He discussed about his importance to the team and what he brings. But he's another player that will have a late fitness test on Saturday. So, again, question marks, maybe in that squad, more of an optimistic or hopeful punt that he comes through that fitness test without any kind of reaction. And yeah, that's why I have him starting.
Asif has asked, any word on Willian? Is his injury serious? Is he expected to be in that starting 11?
Well, we haven't had any kind of definitive diagnosis. We know that it's a calf strain, a calf related problem. Always difficult, particularly as well when he, considering his age, takes a little bit longer to recover from these problems. He is more of a doubt, I would say, than the others, and definitely he might be a player that I look to remove from this starting 11. Marco Silva said there are still players who are flagged as major doubts and some players who are just out of contention altogether, and Willian is probably in the latter category, given the fact that even if it is a minor calf issue, you don't want to take any risk. You don't want to exacerbate that. It's at best, you're talking maybe a 10 to 14 day injury. At worst, that could easily stretch beyond a month, which, Silva doesn't want. So maybe I'll be looking to bring Willian out once I get around to updating those predicted lineup.
So we've got a question here from J. Andre. He's asked, in your opinion, Ben, do you buy or sell Mitrovic in your FPL teams?
If you have him, he's definitely worth a keep. And I would start him just on the premise that, like I say, that there is a chance. There's always a chance for Mitrovic. If I didn't, then I certainly wouldn't be looking to go out and buying him at this point. He's a much better prospect, going into game week 11, where, like I say, even if he does miss out this week, I would expect him game week 11. And even if he has recovered or he passes a fitness test, then there are going to be question marks on how many minutes he's actually going to play. We've seen that at Craven Cottage against Newcastle. He did pass that test, but took a heavy knock and was forced off once again. And so that would be enough, to scare me.
We've got a lot of people upset about this. Nuclear Atom says, oh no, just when I thought we had a good asset, he's got injured. Final one on the Fulham situation. We've got Another question from Asif. Is Palhinha expected to start? He didn't play against Newcastle.
The reason it didn't start against Newcastle was suspension. So 100%, no doubts. He comes into the team and he replaced another suspended midfielder, that Chabala, who was sent off for his naughty tackle on Sean Longstaff. Thankfully, Longstaff, that wasn't too serious, but yeah, he'll be coming straight back into that start 11.
That's a good description, a naughty tackle. Let's move our attention on to Leeds then, and we're going to be talking through this lineup here. Again, it's not too much change apart from Bamford back in the leading the lineup. Now, you made the call, was it last week? You said that Rodrigo could be back in the team. He did make it back in. This is a strong looking team, apart from obviously Sinistera was given the red card. So Rodrigo's kind of replacing that position. But again, I like Leeds. I think they're a good looking attack. But is there other injury information that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, nothing like major in terms of those starting 11 players. That's pretty much locked in. Diego Llorente is a player who dropped out for Cooper last weekend. He's one that you'd maybe look to switch out. Patrick Bamford actually picked up a knock in training last week. I was fairly confident that he would have started against Aston Villa, but that knock was just enough to put Jess Marsh off, and that's why we didn't see him in the 11. But as you alluded to, the suspension to Sinistera, that opens the door. Patrick Bamford has trained well all week, got a hat-trick for the under-21s during the international break, so getting a lot sharper. That's why I have him leading that front line.
And Nuclear Atoms is especially pleased with Bamford being back. He said it now feels like a global phenomena that he is back in the team. Alfred69 has said, is Bamford worth a punt against Palace? Would you get him in, maybe for the likes of the injured Mitrovic?
I'm certainly not keen on those knee-jerk reactions and just taking punts on players for a 1 week. If it was a case of maybe looking at bringing Bamford in with a view of the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, then yes, because the more minutes, the more games he plays, the shorter he becomes. And he's going to be the focal point of that Leeds attack. And we've seen he has been able to score and produce at the highest level for Leeds. If it was just for this game, then no, I see this as a difficult fixture. And like I say, we won't be seeing Patrick Bamford at 100%, and we may not even see 90 minutes from Patrick Bamford. It could be that Jess Marsh looks to manage his minutes again, given the fact that he's missed so much football.
Yeah, there's discussions in the comments about how long he's been out for. Somebody has said, was he out since pre-COVID? It feels like forever. And this is the thing with him being back in the 11 as well. It is kind of a gamble just because it's going to take a while for him to get up to that return to playing level, that kind of match sharpness, that ability to finish goals and things. But let's move on to the Leicester lineup. Potentially exciting news there. Is it right, Ben? Vardy is going to lead the line.
It is, in my opinion. He got the nod ahead of Patson Daka last time out. Daka had been struggling with illness during the international break, so that affected his fitness a little bit. But this lineup's based purely on the premise that they got that first win of the season against Nottingham Forest on Monday night. So I'm plumbing for more or less the same 11. One change would be the absence of Wilfred Ndidi. That's a hamstring problem. Could keep him out until the end of October. So I have Samari, which is a like-for-like replacement. I'm hoping, we have heard from Brendan Rodgers previously talk about, he cannot rely on Jamie Vardy quite as much as he used to. The only slight worry is, are there going to be question marks on whether he can start, 2 Premier League games within fairly quick succession? I think so.
It's a big shout, and with Leicester at the moment, I still have my misgivings just over the fact that they've looked so poor. I think, with the big scoreline against Nottingham Forest, probably flatters to deceive. I'm not really too interested in the moment. I mean, James Maddison looks good. He probably transcends the fixtures and how bad the team is. He himself is all right. but the rest of the 11, it doesn't give me much hope. But is there? Oh, so somebody has asked, no Ward in between the sticks.
Yeah, that's probably one I will change in all honesty. Yeah, we'll have to go back with Ward of that. I took a bit of a punt on Iverson, thinking, that 6 goals that they conceded, thought that maybe Brendan Rodgers would have changed things up a little bit, but no, you probably nailed that one. I will go Ward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
very bad.
Again, as we say to people, these are just kind of initial teams. Ben hasn't updated it. It's he needs to do this in the system.
Yeah, it's a working document.
Yeah.
I always class it as a working document, and it is updated and tweaked throughout up until that FPL deadline.
Thank you for our eagle-eyed viewers picking that one out. And the final one from Giandre is Castagna and Justin nailed?
I think it's hard to change things too much after a 4-0 win. Confidence will be high. Brendan Rodgers will feel that, his season starts from this point. He'll want to kick on. So, a clean sheet, a good performance. I think certainly for this game week that both players will be locked in.
Right, let's turn our attention then to the Reds of Liverpool. And again, some interesting team changes there. As we said at the start, Arsenal, Liverpool this weekend, one of the headliner games. What is the latest information there? Because it's a fairly interesting attack there.
Yeah, Liverpool tweaked their formation midweek against Rangers. Jurgen Klopp said they had become a little bit predictable, wanted to keep the opposition guessing, and I've sort of went along those similar lines. Of course, it means that I've dropped Jordan Henderson. That decision based purely on the fact that, he's coming back from a hamstring problem as well. So again, we're talking about 3 starts in a week. Fairly risky given the high re-injury and recurrence rates of hamstring problems. Harvey Elliott out of contention as well. Last weekend, we've seen Jota and likes of Diaz, Nunes. They were all struggling post-international break through one thing and another, fatigue-related absence, but to have them back in the starting lineup with Roberto Firmino leading that attack. Still too soon for Robbo, Andy Robertson. He is running outside. Curtis Jones is probably next in line, with regards to a comeback. Robbo may be an outside chance for game week 11, but again, it'll come down to his fitness and sharpness on whether Jurgen Klopp feels he's ready to come into that starting 11.
Yeah, what has this injury been to Robertson that's kept him out?
Yeah, that's a knee problem. So, it's not muscular related. He's a guy who inherently has played, a hell of a lot of minutes over the last few years, certainly since arriving at Liverpool. Doesn't have too much of an injury history because he's always available. Picked up this, nasty knee problem. I think it was against Napoli in the Champions League, if I recall correctly, very late on in the game. It wasn't too severe, but like I say, he's been out now for what would be approaching maybe sort of 3 to maybe 4 weeks, and he's more or less there now. So like I say, he shouldn't be too far away.
I love the transfer advice from Giandre. He's saying, sell Trent, buy Martinelli, and come on, you Gooners. So, I've got to agree with that 100%. Manchester City, is this the back line that we want to keep with Ben, or is there going to be changes there as well? Because it is interesting. Is it right there's only 2 fit fullbacks now at the club?
There is. So Sergio Gomez and Cancelo, the 2 fit fullbacks. Pep Guardiola did reference, I think it was a guy, I think it might have been Luis Rico, 17-year-old. Apologies if I've got that totally wrong. But he did talk about the possibility of maybe promoting him from under that 21 side. He's a guy with a lot of potential. But in terms of experienced fullbacks, yes, we've only got the 2 at the moment. We have seen John Stones deployed as a right back, but we know that he picked up that hamstring problem playing for England as well. Centre-back is the little bit of the conundrum at this moment in time. A lot of people surprised that Diaz was dropped last weekend, but Pep, we know he likes to play a right-footed on the right-hand side of that central and a left footer. Now, Aymeric Laporte, he's returning off a long-term knee injury and played midweek. So that means, Ake will play in there. And Akanji, I do expect on the right-hand side. Neither players, really put a foot wrong. In decent form. We've seen it the other way around, for the Champions League game against FC Copenhagen. So that's why I've went with this preferred back four.
I think we moved on from Liverpool slightly too quickly. We'll quickly go through these questions. Quick fire, Ben. Maris has asked, do you expect Ben to stick to the new 4-2-3-1?
I do for this weekend at least. Things haven't been great. We've had a very indifferent start to the campaign, well below the standards that we would expect certainly from Liverpool. So Jurgen Klopp was very pleased with how they played against Rangers. So I expect that to continue and set up in a similar vein against Arsenal.
All right, so we're moving from City across the city to Manchester United, and it looks like Rashford. He's going to be leading the line there. Rest of the team fairly settled. Is that correct, Ben?
The three sort of, I suppose, talking points or issues that I looked at following that Derby defeat at left back. I was toying with the idea of Luke Shaw potentially coming back in. McTominay, starting. I had Casemiro, and then I switched back, and then of course the Marcus Rashford. Indicative for me was that Europa League starting 11 where Casemiro started there. That's why he played 80+ minutes. That's why I'm thinking McTominay. They continue with a more or less similar starting 11. I'm thinking that Erik ten Hag is just going to write off that Derby Day defeat, put it down to experience, put it down to the Haaland show and just how great City are, and maybe go back to how they ground out results prior to that. So that's why I've got, is it Malaysia at left back, if I pronounced that right. I was going to go with Anthony Martial leading that attack, but although Erik ten Hag is very impressed with his performances, he has admitted that he's still managing his minutes following, those consecutive injuries that he's had.
Now, you have to say something with a Newcastle-like twang to it, Ben. Up the tune, it's Newcastle. What's the latest on their situation?
All good in the hood. Alan Saint-Maxim, full week on the training pitches. So, Eddie Howe's car, he could be look, he's available and he's going to be in the squad. Unless there's any problems today or overnight, I guarantee Saint-Maxim will be a part of that match day group. Not fit enough to start yet. Again, not too much. The only big call that I've had to make is at left back, and that's with Dan Burn or Matty Targett and Sven Botman. I went with Targett just because I think he's a more natural left-sided player. But it's difficult, after a 4-1 win at Craven Cottage, a great performance, again, not to change things up. Targett had been struggling in the build-up to that game. That's why Dan Burn was involved. So, yeah, it's, two doesn't, three doesn't go into two. So I do expect rotation maybe between those three over the course of the season and in and around, those congested periods, maybe Christmas when we kick off again, and maybe those midweek fixtures. The biggest, I suppose, player at risk may be Sven Botman. We've seen him drop out twice around that time, just as he's adapting to the rigors of the Premier League and getting up to full speed. So, he would be the one that maybe drops out. But for this week, I'm hopeful that Botman starts. But I really do like Dan Burn. Done a fantastic job since his arrival, and he could consider himself very, very unlucky.
FPL Rubber Ducky has said quack quack to you, Ben.
Yeah. How do I really respond to that?
Quack 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 quack. Going on to Nottingham Forest, I don't think anybody's really interested in their assets at the moment. Ben, is there any injury news, or do we move on?
Yeah, doing them. I'm not. I don't want to do them a disservice. We haven't heard from Steve Cooper as yet. Haven't made any major changes. Not really aware of any problems. In fact, the treatment room in recent weeks has cleared the decks. We're just waiting on Omar Richards, following his arrival. But other than that, it'll purely just come down to tactical decisions and how Steve Cooper wants to set up his team.
Moving to the Saints, Southampton. Any updates there that we need to be aware of?
We're expecting to have the same squad as the last weekend. But again, in terms of assets, does anybody hold any real appeal from that same squad? Certainly not ahead of a visit, to Manchester City. So, yeah, fingers crossed, and I'm wishing them every success.
Now, we move on to Tottenham. And last week I asked you Kulu, you said Kulu who, but he's not in the team again. You know who I'm talking about now this time.
Right. Well, I've had lots of comments this week, and although I haven't responded, and I've had a little bit of grief, and Ben, you're not pronouncing it correct. So, and somebody has in block capital letters quite nicely laid it out on how it should be said. So that was Kulu Sev Ski. So there you go. That's just for all of those guys that keep on pointing out that I can't pronounce his name correctly. Hamstring injury, probably another 10, maybe 14 days. So that's not great. So in terms of those three in attack, that pretty much picks itself. The only main talking point or discussion point is around the absence of Emerson Royale. Of course, he was dismissed. Was it a tackle on Martinelli? Looked a little bit harsh for me, but it earned him a red card. Now, who comes in on that right-hand side? Matt Doherty, for me, he has just sort of declared that, he's back up to speed now in terms of his fitness. We know his season was curtailed last year because of that ligament problem. We have seen Antonio Conte go with Ivan Perisic on the right and Ryan Sessegnon on the left, and he's a big fan of Sessegnon. So this is me slight worry. I have went with Doherty, but like I say, it wouldn't surprise me if it was Perisic and Sessegnon. This is just a 50-50 call, a coin toss.
You've had a lot of applause for your fantastic pronunciation there, Ben. Samir has asked about Bruno. You did have him in your Newcastle starting 11. And Nuclear Atom says, justice for Spence. How is he not getting a chance? But we're going to move on to West Ham. They played last night. Any injury news from that game that people need to be aware of?
Everybody came through that game unscathed. Again, it was a heavily changed lineup from David Moyes, affording those opportunities for those players on the fringe. I have Scamacca starting with Antonio on the bench. Other talking points in and around. Not much really. Maxwell Cornet forced off against Wolves last weekend. That's a calf issue. Certainly long term. Maybe the Europa Conference League on Thursday for him, or possibly game week 11.
And then we move on to the final team of the game week, Wolves. So what is the latest there? Because it seems to be an ever-changing situation with their front line, injuries impacting them, but no Diego Costa up top yet.
Yeah, we heard from interim manager, is it James Collins? Possibly, I think it was. And he spoke about Diego Costa, and he said, we're scared of Diego Costa, never mind the opposition. And Diego Costa wants more. He wants to be out there. He wants more minutes. He wants to start. But there's a consideration there that before last weekend, he hadn't made a competitive appearance since December last year. And they're looking to protect the player, not throw him in at the deep end too soon, because, given the fact that they've lost Raul Jimenez for now and Kalazanic, hope I've got that right as well, he's probably out for the season. Then they can't afford too many injuries in that attacking area. So that's why I've opted for Podence. But look, this joint interim duo will have their own ideas about how they want to set up the team. They will have their own ideas on personnel. And this is why I've went for the team. A couple of enforced changes. Pedro Neto, we've just found out that He needs surgery on that ankle injury picked up against West Ham. That's ruled him out of the World Cup. So, we won't see him before the back end of December and possibly even longer. Ruben Neves was dropped into that backline last week. He picked up his 5th caution of the campaign. So he's ruled out for one game. That's why we have Traore in midfield. And I've got Totti, who would sit on the left-hand side of Max Kilman. But again, this will purely based on maybe what I knew of Bruno Lage and what his expectations were. Admittedly, I'll hold my hands up. I've got absolutely nothing on these new guys. And like I say, they might want to make their own mark, implement their own philosophies. Although what he did say, we won't be changing things too much because, that could cause more problems.
Nuclear Atoms has pointed out something that might be a problem soon is Conte versus Costa. That could be a fiery affair, especially with how that ended. But I think we're coming to the end here, Ben. You've got to shoot off. You've got a busy schedule. And I think we've answered all the questions here for everybody in the community. We're always back every deadline giving you the most up-to-date injury information. So hit that subscribe button. Make sure to like the video and share it as well so that everybody can be up to date with their injury news. It's been great talking to you all, and we'll see you again. Probably we might be live over the weekend if there's any big injury news, but if not, we'll see you again Monday all through the week giving you data and injury news. But yeah, that's it from us, Ben.
Yep, until the next time, cheers Jason. I really enjoyed it, guys, and thanks